Hey guys, Metal Viking 82 here, back to show some more plunder that I've acquired over the last little while. Got another stack of 2024 releases to go over with you today. So we're going to just jump right into things with the brand new one from Darkest Hour entitled Perpetual Terminal. Melodic death metal slash metalcore out of Washington, D.C. Been around since 1995. This is their 10th full-length album out on MNRK Heavy. Their first album in 7 years, and straight off the bat, when you listen to this, I definitely got a real Killswitch Engage vibe to this album, which, considering these guys came out around the same time as them, kind of makes sense. They would kind of have similar sounding styles. But this thing just has some really great guitar work on here with a good mix of heavy and yet melodic moments, even throwing in some acoustic guitar at times. They're thrashy at times with some nice headbangable grooves, leaning heavily more towards the melodic death metal side in certain spots. And you also get some nice chuggy sections, such as in track number 4, The Nihilist Undone, at about 28 seconds into that song, and just some really great solos throughout this thing. Backing up the guitars is this thick tone bass that can be easily heard. Sits a little bit lower in the mix, still sounds really good. Solid drum work with lots of nice patterns, rolls, and fills. Especially love the double bass on here. And I think John Henry's harsh sounding vocals sound as good as ever, mixing in roars and screams at times, and even some clean vocals, such as in the excuse me, the 5th track, One with the Void. And they actually kind of reminded me a little bit of Andrea Ferro of Lacuna Coil. But overall, pretty solid metalcore album. Next up, the band that definitely has its detractors just as much as it does its fans. But this is the new one from Knocked Loose, You Won't Go Before You're Supposed to. I was kind of disappointed because the sticker on here says that it came with a digital download, and I did not have one in my copy. I didn't notice that until recently, and I was like, well, that's a bummer. But yeah, Knocked Loose, a hardcore band from Oldham County, Kentucky, been around since 2013. This is their 3rd full-length album, put out by Pure Noise Records. And man, this thing is an absolute banger, in my opinion. Thick, heavy bass. While it doesn't stick out too much in the mix, though, when you get around track number 6, Take Me Home, you hear it a lot more clearly. It really works well with the guitars for this heavy as fuck wall of sound. Pounding drums that are never really flashy, but he hits with authority. Has a high snap to the snare. And I love the kick drum sound on here that he gets, and he does some nice double bass and blast beats at times. Though driving this album, much like a lot of their releases, are those heavy, slightly dirty sounding guitars that, while they do have their more mid to fast-paced moments, are all about those heavy, skull-crushing chugs and grooves. When you get into track number 10, Sit and Mourn, this slow riff comes in at 3:01. That, because of the dissonant sound that riff has, I swear it reminded me of the Terminator theme. I am not joking. I was listening to that every time I listened to it. I was like, I swear to God, that reminds me of the Terminator, which is not a bad thing because the first Terminator is an absolutely badass movie. Of course, Brian Garris's vocals are one of the most notorious parts of this band, though, with their high pitched yells, but he mixes them with these low growls at times, and here they are in top form. Like I said, very notorious for his vocals. A lot of people like to make fun of him for that. You also get 2 guest vocalists on here. Poppy appears on track number 3, Suffocate, and I never heard her before. I knew who she was, but I never heard her voice before, and I thought she did a killer job. And then you got Chris Motionless from Motionless and White appearing on track number 7, Slaughterhouse 2, which they've played on Liquid Metal here a lot recently. But yeah, really solid album in my opinion. Go check it out. Next up, another absolute banger. This is the new one from Ingested, entitled The Tide of Death and Fractured Dreams. Slam, brutal death metal, deathcore band from Manchester, England. Been around since 2006. This is their 8th full-length album put out by Metal Blade Records. This thing is just absolutely driven by those heavy, crunchy guitars. They're fast-paced, but still have plenty of chugs, some of which are nice and slow and heavy. But you also get these, chuggy grooves at times, and just absolutely killer-sounding solos on here. The bass, while thick, doesn't stand out much, except for in certain spots, such as in the 3rd track, where No Life Shines. It really comes through a lot in that song. It definitely helps build a solid, heavy wall throughout the entire album. The powerful sounding drums, though, really impressed me with their, solid patterns, rolls, and fills, but also those seriously fast double bass flourishes and just absolutely sick sounding blast beats. The vocals on here actually kind of remind me of Peter Tackren on the Bloodbath album Nightmares Made Flesh, but he also mixes in these even lower growls and snarls, and just at times he sounds just downright beastly delivering his vocals. Clean vocals actually even make an appearance on here, such as in the closing track, track number 10, A Path Once Lost. That song is actually mostly clean vocals. He does mix in the growls and snarls, but for the most part, you get mostly clean vocals, which I know a lot of people hate clean vocals being in death metal, but yeah, this is just an absolute banger of an album. Definitely a high contender for being on my year-end list. Next up, Brutalism with Solace in Absurdity. Technical, brutal death metal out of Boise, Idaho. Been around since 2020. This is their debut full-length album put out by Comatose Music. And with this one, the kind of overall production of this album has that slight unpolished feel to it, but not, it's not too bad. It's definitely not like raw and primitive or anything, but you tell it's definitely not clear and pristine. It just has that slight dirtiness to it, which actually works, I think, for this album. The bass has that techie twang to it and can be easily heard throughout this entire album. Really great drumming on here with lots of fast double bass and blast beats. The snare has a high snap to it, though it's not quite that annoying ping that a lot of brutal death metal bands seem to suffer from. And I especially love the kick sound on here, especially during the double bass parts. Unpolished but very crunchy sounding guitars all over this album. They're mostly fast paced with some pinch harmonics at times, but they also like to slow things down to like a more mid-tempo chug and groove. When you get into track number 8, Compulsive Acts of Repulsion, the opening riff to that song actually has quite a deathcore-ish sound to it. I mean, death metal and brutal death metal have their breakdowns, much like deathcore does, but that one, as soon as you hear it, it's like, yeah, that's really deathcore-ish. But I like deathcore, and it's just like a brief opening riff, but still very cool sounding. Nice vocal variety on this album, with the majority being the typical low guttural growls you would expect in brutal death metal, but he also utilizes some more mid-range growls and gurgles and roars, and then you get the occasional pig squeal, which I don't mind pig squeals as long as they're not overly done in like the main vocal style. But he only utilizes them a couple times on here. He just mostly sticks with the gutturals and everything, but still, very brutal album, very kick-ass, hell of a debut from this band, in my opinion. Next up, I didn't even realize this was the same band that I had a couple albums from, because they changed their logo. I saw this on Amazon, and I was like, oh, cool. See, that's interesting. I listened to a song from it. I was like, yep, I've got to get that. And then I was looking them up. I was like, holy shit, this is the same band. I didn't even realize it. But this is Sickening with the Death King. Really badass artwork there. Yeah, these guys are brutal death metal out of Florence, Italy. Been around since 2003. This is their 4th full-length album put out by Amputated Vein Records. This is actually their first album in 9 years. I didn't realize it had been that long since I've seen anything put out by this band. Yeah, this is all about the old school death metal style guitar work with this album. It's mid to fast paced, lots of headbangable grooves, such as the nice one at 222 in track number 5, the Ropeless Jump Bridge. And I love the double bass and the twangy bass line that's going on underneath. But it also has, some more chuggy grooves. I mean, just listen to track number 6, the Where the Eye Can't See. Those chuggy grooves are all over that song. You also get some pinch harmonics now and then. And actually, some of the riffs on here not only give off Cannibal Corpse vibes, but there were some that was even giving me some Morbid Angel vibes as well. The bass, as I stated earlier, is thick and twangy, very easily heard throughout this whole thing. Killer drumming with nice patterns, rolls, and fills, and lots of sick double bass and blast beats. Vocals are these powerful low-end growls, not quite guttural, but damn near, but they got a lot of power to them, and just an absolutely sick album. Go check these guys out. And last, but most certainly not least, I believe it was Necrotic Nick that actually showed me this band, and very happy he did, because this is definitely one of my favorite releases of 2024 so far, but this is The Funeral Procession with Instill Silence. Progressive death metal out of Dallas, Texas, been around since 2008, and this is just their debut full-length album put out by the band themselves. One thing you would notice about this album, this is one of those albums that has lengthy songs, but they're just so well written and executed that you don't even hardly notice how long they are. You just get really caught up in everything, and it just flows so nicely. The bass is thick and easily heard. I love the drum production on this thing. He does a lot of cool patterns, rolls, and fills, and the double bass and blast beats are just absolutely solid in my opinion. Excellent guitar work all over this thing, and a great mix of the heavy and emotive guitar riffing, and at times they're sounding very ethereal, and then you even get these more like mid-pace kind of black metal-esque sounding riffs, as well as some more acoustic sounding guitars and these just heavier sounding chugs. When you get into the second track, Siren's Lament, about 4:55 into that song is a really great example of the black metal riffing that is sprinkled throughout this album, and the vocals even take on a very black metal-esque snarl to them. Lots of moments on this album are very reminiscent of Opeth, maybe even some Catatonia, especially when they mix the acoustic guitars with the more clean vocals. And speaking of Brian Cox's vocals, he has a nice variety to his vocals on this album. They're these mostly powerful low-end growls that bring to mind November's Doom with their power yet clarity at the same time. But he also utilizes cleans, as I stated, and screams, and even some black metal rasps at times. And honestly, a very somber atmosphere definitely permeates this album at times, such as in the third track, Forsaken, about 5:44 into that song. Like I said, these are pretty lengthy songs. Those acoustic guitars and the way they mixed with the piano and Brian's clean vocals just really created this very somber, dark atmosphere. Really dug this album. Definitely go check these guys out. Another one that is definitely going to be on my year-end list. And yeah, that is going to do it. Thank you guys so much for watching and subscribing. And until next time, stay brutal.